up, and I think it's time for us now to go and head over to a fun and exciting panel at the premiere stage. It's the Walt Disney Imagineering 70 Years of Making the Impossible Possible. We'll see you back here at D23 Expo Live.
Walt had this idea, and whoever he called in, it was instantaneous. You were supposed to be instantly productive and kind of instant genius.
Walt believed that you could make anything alive, but you had to believe it was alive.
Walt said it. You can design, create, and build the most wonderful place in the world, but it takes people to make the dream a reality. So from the very beginning, we built the organization from within. That was true in Disney Imagineering, and it was true in the operating end of the business.
Disneyland is the thing that I can keep molding and shaping. It's the three-dimensional thing to play with.
Everyone is enthusiastic. It's an optimism, like we can do this next, and then we'll do this, go from one exciting project to the next.
Our projects are so complex and so detailed, down to the last bolt.
It's like making magic out of nothing.
We are the people who take care of the stories.
We really test our thinking, and then we test it again, and then we test it again, and then we iterate again, and then we iterate again.
We all love working together, working on something that's amazing. It defines who we are.
It's an Imagineering cultural thing when you're on site to build a new family.
Your heart really is in it, and it gets very emotional when you open something that you spent 4 years, of your life in.
The experience that people have when they go to a park where there's truly a belief that we're the only ones that could do this is a very, very big deal. It's vital to who we are as a company.
We create three-dimensional stories that people experience, that have emotion and have time and space and tug at you and draw you. And that's totally Walt. We are the descendants of Walt. We learned it from way back then.
The nuances of why things work are very subtle. The micro adjustments is where the emotion is.
It's not in our nature to do easy things. For us as Imagineers, it's a pride thing.
To capture that lightning in the bottle, it's our mentality. We are going to innovate.
It's fantastic when you see people that don't know what they can do, and then you watch them blossom and create things, and then they're the future Imagineers.
The big dynamic in our lives really is change. Walt Disney had one foot in the past and one foot in the future.
We really have a unique ability by building on Imagineering's past to shape a future that inspires humanity.
We are testing the limits of technology, and that makes it hard. Invention is hard, but that's what we do. We always want guests to walk away and say, how did Disney do that?
Wow. Try not to get too emotional here, but boy, it's just so touching. Just gives me chills. You are among the very first and very select few to see that video. Wasn't that special? Well, hi everyone. I'm Barbara Boza, President of Walt Disney Imagineering. Wow, thank you for that warm welcome. I really do appreciate it. I'm so excited to join you here today as we celebrate 70 years of Imagineering. Our rich legacy of immersive experiential storytelling is what draws so many of us to become Imagineers. And so many fans like you to want to learn even more. There's nothing like working alongside Imagineers from around the world who thrive on doing the impossible. So together, we share a spirit of optimism, always looking to the future, looking to what's next. And this continues to inspire me, and I'm excited for you to hear more from our Imagineers today. But before I hand it over, I want to take a moment on behalf of all Imagineers to thank you. You know, Disney fans are special, but Imagineering fans are the next level. So come on, let's hear it. Thank you so much, really, on behalf of Imagineers. Really appreciate everything you've done, your support. So your passion and appreciation for the work we do, from the tiniest details to the most thrilling attractions, the spectaculars, and everything in between. It's what really gives us our drive every single day. And we are so grateful for your support. With that, I want to introduce somebody I deeply admire, the director of both the amazing Disney Plus documentary, The Imagineering Story. I'm hoping everybody in this room has seen it. All right, here we go. And that tribute you just saw for the 70th anniversary, you saw? You know who put that together? Leslie Iwerks. So I'm also introducing. Thank you. Oh my God. Thank you. All right. I'm going to leave it to you, Leslie.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. I'm so honored to be introduced by such an amazing leader as yourself. Thank you, everybody. It is so great to be here. How does it feel to be at D23? Right? Well, I'm super honored to be back here celebrating WDI's 70th anniversary and moderating today's panel about 70 years of making the impossible possible. That video that we just made was just a small snippet, as you know, of the joy Imagineering has created over 7 years. Or 7 decades, I should say. 7 years, nothing. 7 decades. And the genius and innovation really is awe-inspiring, as we all know. Last time I was here was at the D23 Expo when I was unveiling the Imagineering story in November, right before on Disney Plus. And you know, it became COVID, so I think all y'all watched it during COVID or something. But I was really happy with the response, and I want to thank all of you for that. But after documenting over 200 people, interviewing literally over 200 people over the span of 7 years, the hardest part for me and our team was the realization that there were so many stories left on the cutting room floor. And stories I know that we fans would all love to hear and know about. So, my collaborators, Mark Catalina and Bruce Steele and I, got to work, and thanks to Wendy Lefcon at Disney Editions, I'm thrilled to unveil this new 750-page biography of Walt Disney Imagineering, The Imagineering Story. Yay! Chronicling the work of the thousands of Imagineers, past and present, who have had a hand in creating 12 theme parks and countless experiences around the world over 7 decades. It has been my honor to be the messenger of such history, including great stories from the legendary folks that you're about to hear on this panel today. I would also like to give a special shout out to the many Imagineers watching this live stream around the world, and to the late Marty Sklar's wife and daughter, Leah and Leslie Sklar, who are here with us today. Where are they? So now I want to share how we plan to cover 70 years in 90 minutes. It's going to go fast. It's an impossible task, but Imagineering is known for creating the impossible, right? So what we decided to do is split our time into 2 panels, one focused on creative imagination and the other focus on technical know-how. After all, Walt Disney Imagineering is a blend of both. So our creative Imagineers will share how imagination and story are at the heart of everything they do. And our Imagineers within technology and innovation will share stories of triumph and a few occasional failures along the way in making the magic real. So let's get started. Please welcome to the stage our first round of panelists, the one and only Bob Weiss. Jeanette Lomboy. Thank you. Jim Irvine. Woo. Jim, good to see you. And Sharita Carter. Sharita, good to see you. And the one and only Kevin Rafferty. Give you a hug, too.
All right.
So, it's come to my attention that on this stage is 160 years of combined Imagineering experience. How does that feel?
Wow.
Wow. This is
that's just Bob.
No, Kim. Kevin.
It's the panel of superstar Imagineers right here. So I'd love to start by asking you all just sort of your elevator pitch of what your career has been since you started at Disney up to now. Let's start with you, Kevin.
Well,
kind of the history of where we started to where it is now? Okay. Some of you know that I started in the dish room at Disneyland at the Plaza Inn right across the street. And after that, I transferred up to WED Enterprises, where I got a very entry-level position. But not too long, short after that, I was able to get into the creative division, and I became a show writer and ultimately a creative director. And I got to work on a lot of shows and help create and deliver a lot of attractions over the years. Got to work with, lots of Disney legends, Marty Sklar, and a lot of the people that actually founded, the Disney theme park business. It ultimately culminated into Cars Land and my last project with Sharita Carter here, Mickey Minnie's Runaway Railway. And the picture of the parking lot is there because when I was a kid working in the dish room, I used to go out with my fellow dishwashers and dream about some of the attractions we might do if we ever had the chance. Like, yeah, right, if we ever had the chance. I had the chance. It really happened. Your dreams can come true. And so that picture of the parking lot is where I used to park my car when I was a cast member. And then a few years later, that's exactly where the City Hall of Radiator Springs is in Cars Land. So that was very cool. I show that little red car because with Sharita and I put together Mickey Minnie's Runaway Railway, we created a little red car for Mickey and Minnie to drive, and it was real. I'm almost done. And I was very surprised that when I retired last year, they were going to have like a little Zoom party for me. I thought a couple of people would show up. There were hundreds of people on the Zoom. My doorbell rang, and lo and behold, I opened the door. Bob Weiss and some of my favorite friends and colleagues, family really, Sharita was there, and they set up an elaborate buffet on my driveway. And Bob presented me with this statue that's a replica of, is that beautiful? The little red car with me and Mickey inside of it. And I'll tell you, if my house was on fire, that would be the first thing I'd grab. The second thing would be my autographed copy of Leslie's book, The Imagineering Story. And then I would go in and grab my wife. I love you, honey. I'm just kidding, wherever you are. Okay.
Sharita.
Okay, well, first of all, I just have to say, I love being an Imagineer. Get to work with so many incredible people, so much world-class talent. I have been with Walt Disney Imagineering for 25 years. And the first 10 of those years, I was actually in finance. And I know a lot of you have heard me tell that story of how I went from finance to the last 15 years for which I've been in creative, where I have had the privilege of working in blue sky, working in creative development, managing a scenic illusion team, and now producing and getting attractions in front of all of you. So it's been an amazing, amazing career journey.
And Kim?
Well, I started my career at Walt Disney Imagineering in 1970. We were working on Walt Disney World at that time. We were just about 6 months from opening. And I worked in the model shop. And at that time, the model shop did everything. You would be painting a tiki bird or feathering a tiki bird one day, painting a small world doll the next day, carving a tiki pole the next day. And it was so wonderful to work with all the original Imagineers. When we finished that, I went on to start working on color and its application to architecture with John Hench, who was my mentor. And we worked very much on new color schemes for Disneyland at that time. Disneyland was already about, 15, 20 years old. And he really wanted to update some of the color schemes in old Fantasyland and on Main Street. So as we were working on concentrating on Disneyland, Rolly Crump, who you see in that picture, was also a dear mentor. And he began to worry about Disneyland not getting the care and feeding that it had been given when it was the only child. We were working on Epcot, we had Tokyo, and we had Paris in the wings, and Imagineering was really starting to, broaden their horizons. So he decided to put together a team of people that would concentrate just on that firstborn and have them work down at Disneyland, all on Disneyland projects to make sure that we kept, refreshing things and renewing things and looking how to keep Disneyland exciting. So it was just myself as the show designer, Paula Dinkle was our lighting designer, Tom LeDuc was our special effects designer, and we had the late Kirk Winteroth as a coordinator. And that was back in like 1975, and so today we're a big team doing exactly the same thing, but we have about 40 Imagineers on site just taking care of our Disneyland.
And thank you, Kim. And Jeanette?
I'm just pinching myself up here, and I think if I think about my career at Imagineering, it started well before I even became an Imagineer. I was that child who grew up 10 minutes away from Disneyland, and Disneyland was the extension of my backyard, and I knew I wanted to work the rides when I was like 5. I wanted to be a storybook land canal ride operator. That's what I knew I wanted to be. Don't know why, right? And you can see from the photos, I became one, right? But before that, in high school, I realized, wait, there's more than just operating the rides. Like, there are people that design them, right? And so I single-handedly made every single decision in my life from that point forward, where I was going to go to college, what I was going to do based on the fact that I was going to become an Imagineer. And I sit here and I'm amazed because Kim Irvine was one of the first Imagineers I was acquainted with when she redid Fantasyland decades ago. I'm pitching myself because I'm on this stage with so many amazing Imagineers. I'm here because Bob Weiss was my first boss. I was his intern on Disney's America, right? So, but I want to tell a little story because for any of you who knew me in high school, you know I was obsessed with Imagineering. And let's just say my prom was coming, and I was really excited about going to prom, but I was in an animation program, and unfortunately there was an animation open house on the same night as my prom. And the two special guests that day were Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnson. And my boyfriend says, wait a second, you want to miss the prom to meet these two old men? And I said, yes, I do. I do. They're so responsible for everything. Okay, so you see the picture there at the bottom of the screen, right? I just uncovered this like last year during COVID when I was going through pictures, and I forgot this moment, which is why I'm sharing it. This is how obsessed I was with my dream and fantasy and making things come to reality. So I talked to my boyfriend into going to the animation open house before the prom, all right? So I got my hair all done, the makeup, I had my dress in the car, and I was walking through the doors like, we can spend 30 minutes in here, we can get out, we won't miss it, right? Of course, the place is filled. And some poor person looks at me and I'm like, I can't miss my prom. I want to meet Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnson. My boyfriend's rolling his eyes. So they were really nice. They shuttled me to the front of the line, and Frank and Ollie were just as amazing as I thought they were going to be. I was like, I'm so excited. I'm such a fan of your work. You have no idea what it means to me in my childhood and my dreams of becoming an Imagineer. And they say all these wise words, and I'm like, okay, I have to run. I've got to go to the prom. So as I'm, so literally, I'm literally sprinting out, and Frank stops me and says, wait, have fun at the ball.
That's so cute. Love that.
That's so cute. I'll tell you what, I don't even remember my prom night, okay? But I remember hanging out with two of the most amazing old men ever who have continued to inspire me. That's what they call them, right? It's not, I didn't make that up. But to be fair, that was the start of all of my dreams, and knowing that it didn't matter how far we pushed, if I pushed, that I would amazingly be here up on the stage with all of these amazing people. So since then, again, thank you to Bob. I was just reminding him I wouldn't be here without him. I was his intern. And then, of course, the rest is history, right? You know, there was Aulani, there was Avatar, there's all kinds of great things. So I'll stop, but just thank you for making all of these dreams possible for all of us to keep doing what we do. So thank you.
All right, Bob, you're up.
In 1976, I was coming in from my popcorn shift from Disneyland, and they said, tomorrow you're going to work balloons. And Outdoor Foods had just taken over the balloon franchise. And I worked balloons the next night and went to my boss and said, if I ever have to work balloons again, I'm going to quit. And it's just too stressful for me. I can't do it. And he said, then you'll have to quit. And I did. And that could have been a very short elevator pitch, the shortest in this group.
Glad you didn't quit.
But a couple of years later, with a freshly minted architectural degree in my hand, I managed to be incredibly lucky and get into the best company in the world, WED Enterprises at the time. And for a young graduate from Pomona to Pomona, yes, to be able to move to Tokyo in 1980, to be able to be a part of developing the third park, the Disney, at the time, MGM Studios in Florida, to work in China, to work in Europe, to work across the US, is such a privilege. And I think that starting in Tokyo, for me, gave me a very world view about Disney, a very global view about Disney, that we are an international language, and that we have to respect the place we have in the world and the unique responsibility we have to communicate. So, and I never did go back to selling balloons.
So, Bob, you've gone from balloons to now Global Imagineering Ambassador, and you lead many, many people around the world as Imagineers. What creative lessons have you learned from those Imagineers from when you started? What are some of the creative lessons you've learned?
I think the biggest thing you have to get used to is that you work for a company that not only expects you to think outside the box, but they insist, they support you in thinking outside the box. And you're surrounded by just incredible collaborators who all want to push forward, who want to do things different, they want to do it better. We've got an audience base in all of you who want us to do it better. And so there's an architect, Daniel Burnham, quoted one time from Chicago, that's one of my favorite sayings, and he always said, make big plans, because if the plans aren't big enough, people won't remember them and they won't get done. And I think for all of us who have lived through COVID and many other challenges in our careers, our long careers, I think you'd agree that these things wouldn't have gotten done. Some of these great things that we all worked on, or that our predecessors worked on, simply wouldn't have done if they thought small. And we're not in the business of thinking small.
Go big or go home, right?
Go big or go home.
Well, Kim and Kevin, I want to ask you, what have been some of the creative lessons you've learned from the earliest Imagineers that you got a chance to work with? Kevin, you want to go first?
Okay, when I started, a lot of the people who designed and developed Disneyland were still there. You know, Herbie Ryman and Claude Coates and Mark Davis and Exitencio, they were all there. And so I was a kid when I started, and my job was to, part of my job was to dry mount and cut mats for their original concept designs and all that. So what I didn't know at the time was, I worked in a group called Special Services. It was right in the middle of the building, next to the model shop, and it ended up being a gathering place because all of the original people, you know, it was about 22, 23 years later after Disneyland opened, they were all getting really good at this thing called Imagineering. And so what I soaked in like a sponge was all of them coming in, having me, you know, mount and mat their concepts and artwork, and then telling me about it. I was like the first guy that got to hear about these concepts. And then, as I mentioned, it was a gathering place, and they'd all come in and they'd banter around their ideas, and they'd talk about it, and they'd critique each other, which still happens in the Imagineering culture today. And to answer your question, I think what I learned from them that I carried with me, it was a solid foundation that I carried with me through all the years of my career, was showmanship. And the brevity of showmanship. In other words, some attractions only last for 5 minutes. And they became masters at setting the stage and, you know, the quick read. It's as an audience member, as a guest, you're able to understand what's going on in the scene right away. It was, you know, kind of a distillation of storytelling in a very short amount of time. And the other thing is they were all so passionate and so excited about what they did. And here I am, like I said, I just started, I'm just a kid, and Herbie Ryman's telling me, yes, and then this thing is over here, and they're telling me, just me, about all this kind of stuff. And so I did that for a while, so I'd have to say that the thing I learned from them was not only the passion of what they did and the appreciation for what they did and who they did it for, the guests, but that they were all about showmanship, about creating the best kind of entertainment they possibly could for the amount of time that they had that the attraction allowed. And it was the best school in town. And today I am so honored and privileged to be able to have had that time with, you know, the founding fathers and mothers of Imagineering, you know, Harriet Burns and you know, Maggie Elliott in the model shop, and they were all there in that space with us. And I was just like a little fly on the wall, just soaking it all in. So I could talk for hours about what I learned from them, but I would have to say, what you all enjoy when you go to the parks is that spirit of showmanship.
Harriet Burns, boy, was she something, huh? Kim, you worked with Harriet?
Well, my story is much the same, working in the model shop. The model shop was such an interesting place. It was like Walt's workshop of, you know, like his toy shop where everything was created. And all the original Imagineers that you see there on the screen right now, they didn't stay up in their offices. They worked down in the model shop with us because they loved to see their designs turn into 3D models. We would sit at these big, long tables and they'd sit there and draw with us and talk with us and tell us all of these stories about how Disneyland was created, you know, how their work was done, the inspiration that Walt would give them. And then later, after I worked on Disneyland, John Hench would come down every month, once a month. He never failed. Even when he stopped driving, he'd have a driver bring him down. And we'd walk through the park and talk about why things were the way they were, where this window came from Adams Street when they were tearing down houses to put in the freeway. These rotisseries came from an old restaurant in New Orleans that they put into Plaza Inn. The light poles were from a shop in Paris where they bought one light pole and then recreated all the rest of them for going down Main Street. Just amazing stories that he would share about the creation of Disneyland. And the same with Bill Evans. And, you know, so many of those people would come to Disneyland and tell the stories of where that tree came from. That's a piece of the bow tree that Siddhartha sat under when he was blessed. I mean, it's just, you know, and so now when I walk through the park, it's all that tribal knowledge that we gained from those original Imagineers that I feel so grateful. And when John would come down, after we'd spend 2 or 3 hours in the park, we'd go ride Space Mountain twice, because it's his favorite ride in the world, and then we'd go shaky leg back to Carnation and get an ice cream sundae every month. So, and so now, you know, the last few years of my career, I really, really spend a lot of time with our young Imagineers out in the park, trying to share all that tribal knowledge with them. Because I can't help but, you know, every time I walk through the park, I hear those voices. Everywhere I look, I hear these stories that they would tell me, and I want to pass those on.
Yay. So Jeanette, how are these creative lessons different or the same in how things are done today, the park?
We have so much respect for the Imagineers that came before us and all the work that has been done. And I think that that's absolutely true at Disneyland, as Kim says. We don't want to make changes unless it makes sense, and that we always want to bring them back better. And so I want to talk a little bit about a most recent change, Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout, right? Hey, I'm applauding for that one. I will tell you, we were all nervous about this one. And as I think about it, that was a very fast project. It was like 15 months from when we first thought of a concept to when we actually opened it. But then I think about the original Imagineers who opened Disneyland in less than a year. I mean, I think that that's amazing if you think about that. So in the back of my mind, I always think, where have we come from and where are we going? We always want to bring it back better. And I will tell you, we were nervous about changing Twilight Zone Tower of Terror over. And not because, and by the way, Bob opened the original Twilight Zone Tower of Terror at Walt Disney World, and that's the original. And we knew we wanted to make it better. So even, I knew Bob was on board. He's like, I think this is a great concept. I'm like, I do too, and let's make sure that we give our guests more than what they expect, right? So we added in humor, which by the way, at that point, it's a hilarious, ridiculous ride. We wanted to make sure, and by the way, people don't know this, or maybe they do, it's the exact same ride time. It feels like so much more to me because we jam-packed it with story, we added on crazy songs, and that sensation is different every single time you go on. You never know what you're gonna get. But I think the important part is the core of who we are as Imagineers has remained the same, and the Imagineers that came before us have laid that map out, starting with Walt, to say, the core is storytelling, the core is how the guests receive it, and yes, Disneyland and all of our parks after that are a living, breathing thing. We have to update, become relevant, tell these fresh stories, and bring them back better. And so I believe that we've done that with something like Guardians. We've strived to bring that back better, and that, I think, is true to how we will continue to look at Imagineering into the future as well.
That's great. Well, Trina, you said you started as an accountant.
Yeah.
How does creativity work its way through all creative disciplines?
Yes, well, I did start out in accounting and had this opportunity to transition to creative. And the thing about it is at Imagineering, I think we have like over 140 disciplines or something like that. And everybody is creative and has creativity because our focus is innovation. And innovation requires you to be creative, regardless of whether you're on the team that is doing the ideation or coming up with a concept, or whether you are building or in production or designing or one of the controlling team members. Everybody has an opportunity to innovate. So there's creativity throughout the organization.
Well, I'm excited for Tiana's Bayou Adventure. Who else is excited about that? It seems like whenever you're tackling a first at Imagineering, you're on to your next first. Tell us more about this.
Okay, yeah, I've had the privilege of doing quite a few firsts at Imagineering, and once again, I think when innovation is your focus, there's a lot of opportunities to do that. So I'll take you all the way back to 2009 for the very first D23 Expo. Yay, a couple people who were there. That was actually one of my first producer roles. And then to have the privilege to do the very first Mickey and Minnie ride attraction for our company with Kevin Rafferty is just something that, it was just one of the highlights of my career. It was really, really a great experience. And to be honest with all of you, after having that experience, and as you can imagine, working every day with Kevin Rafferty, I felt like I was in a master class every day. I learned so much from him. And we just had such an amazing team, and it was so much fun bringing that attraction to life. And I really kind of thought after it was over, wow, what's next for me at Imagineering? What could possibly top that, right? And then I got the call from Bob Weiss to tell me that we were going to have an opportunity to bring Tiana to both Magic Kingdom and Disneyland, and that he wanted me to be the producer of that attraction. And I was like, okay, that's what's next. So I am so excited that we're having an opportunity to give Princess Tiana a dimensional space at both of the parks. Many of you fell in love with her as a part of the animated films, and so we are really excited to give you an opportunity to be reacquainted with her, but also to bring her to a number of new generations. It's just really exciting. And she is our first African-American princess, and I think, yeah. And representation matters. And even the couple of days that I've been here at D23, people of all walks of life, all ethnic backgrounds, have come up to me and told me what it means that we are bringing Tiana to the parks. And it's just really been encouraging for me and the team. So we're just really excited that in late 2024, Tiana will be leading all of you on an amazing Bayou adventure at both Disneyland and at Magic Kingdom.
That's your sister out there screaming?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Well, I wanted to ask about something that I've always wanted to sit in on, your blue sky processes. What can you tell me about your one of your best pitches or your least favorite pitches?
Why don't I tell you about both of them?
Okay.
I'll tell you. I think it was the best only because it was we didn't have much time to prepare for it. I mean, Bob was probably there for half the pitches I ever did in the company, and I was fortunate enough to do quite a few. But the one that's most memorable, when I heard that question, the first one that came to mind is Robert Coltrane, who was awarded on Friday as a Disney legend.
Yes!
Well-deserved. Robert was my creative partner in crime in a lot of attractions, and he and I created Toy Story Midway Mania together, and we were working on it. And I got a call from Marty Sklar, and he said, hey, I'm over at the studio talking to Bob Iger and the executive committee, and I'm telling him about this Toy Story thing you and Robert are working on. Can you come over and show it to him? And we were, we had drawings all over the floor. We didn't know how we were going to do it. And I said, sure, when? And he said, well, now, right now. Well, as luck would have it, I happened to have my pickup truck with me that day. So Robert and I madly pinned the rest of the storyboard panels on the big board, threw it in the back of my truck, drove to the studio, and talked about how we had no idea how we were going to do this thing. And so we took our boards upstairs to the executive conference room, and the executive committee was there. And we pitched it to them, and we pitched a lot of things, as I mentioned, that we had no idea how we're going to do. So, yeah, so Mr. Potato Head, he's going to take off his ear. Well, I hope he could, And so, to make a long story short, they loved it, and they wanted, like on the spot, ordered two, one for Disney's Hollywood Studios at Magic Kingdom, or at Walt Disney World, and one here for Disney California Adventure. And I'll never forget, Robert and I were heading back to the truck with the storyboard, and Robert said, Kev, they bought it. And I said, yeah, and that's the good news. But the bad news is, and we both said it at the same time, they bought it. Now we have to figure out how to do it. So I think that's one of the most memorable pitches, because it happened so quickly, and they greenlit it so quickly, and then we had to figure out how to do it. I think the pitch, I don't know if this was the worst pitch I ever did, because it never happened. As many of you know, as these folks especially know, we don't usually work as Imagineers. We don't usually work on projects, just one project at a time. That's a very rare thing. We have a lot of plates spinning in different phases of development, a lot of stuff going on. And so I happened to be at Walt Disney World finishing a project, and I was running out of time. We were going to have an opening day, and again, Marty Sklar called me. He always called me, and he said, "Are you going to the pitch?" I forgot exactly what I was pitching, but he said, "Are you going to the pitch on Tuesday to Michael Eisner and Bob Wells? I mean, Bob Iger?" And I said, "I don't think I can make it, Marty. I have to stay here and finish this. We have a deadline." He says, "So you're not going to go to you're not going to pitch this to Bob Iger and Michael Eisner?" And I said, "No, I don't think I can make it." And so what I want to show you is, and he did send this to them. Marty penned this memo. And I know they received it because the next time I saw Bob Iger, he said, "Kev, sorry we missed you last week." Oh.
Well, you're still here, so
I'm still here.
That's all that matters.
I'm still here.
Stay tuned for more from the Marty Sklar archives.
Right, exactly. Bob, what about you? What's your...
Pitching is, brainstorming and pitching both are such an important part of the work we do. And like your grandmother said, don't ever leave the house with dirty underwear. I always tell people, don't ever leave the house without a pitch, because you don't know when you're going to need that pitch. And you have to have it has to be 5 seconds, but you have to have a 10-minute one or a 1-minute one. You have to have them at all different sizes. But Frank Wells and I made, I think, 5 trips to Tokyo to try to convince Oriental Land Company to do a version of the studio tour, which we had been successful with in Florida, to do that next door to Tokyo Disneyland. And the reason we made 5 trips was because it was a terrible idea. And we kept redoing the pitch, and some things just don't sell. And in the case of Oriental Land Company and Mr. Kagami that some of you saw earlier, they were just too polite to tell us they didn't like the idea. and eventually, we're going back, and I told Frank, they don't like this idea, Frank. He said, "Oh yeah, they love it. Next pitch, I'm like, we don't need to do another pitch. They don't like it." And he finally had a side meeting with Kagami-san, and Kagami said, and he said, "I think you guys like this. What do you think?" And Kagami said, "No, we don't like it." So I knew that I knew that our team had a meeting with Frank Wells, maybe only Frank and Michael, maybe only 4 or 5 days later. And I said, let's just come up with a new idea in 5 days. And we know we have them on Thursday, let's just have a new idea. And we came up with the idea of Tokyo Disney Seas in those 4 days.
Wow,
and
that's amazing.
As difficult as that sounds, it's really about, and I'm sure that everybody here has experienced this, as difficult as it sounds, sometimes it's just the moment and the timeliness of it, and the synapses come together, or the technology comes together, and you have it. And it doesn't necessarily have to take 8 weeks or 12 weeks. It could be in the shower and it suddenly comes out. But it also has to land at the right time, at an opportune time.
Well, good advice for all of us pitching new ideas, right? I just want to check. Our time is what?
The red one?
How much do we have?
The red
how much more time do we have on this panel? I think
it's
kind of confusing. Well, they'll give us the boot when we need to wrap the panel up, because this panel is awesome. So, Kim, you've been focusing on Disneyland Resort. The care that you take every single day at Disneyland Resort, and you all know it, right? How have you managed? How have you continued to manage so much change?
Well, it's a hard thing, because I think Disneyland is such a special park. It's the first park, and as Hens used to say, it's the best park because it's the first park. And I love that. And it was the model for all the other parks that came after it. And I think that, change there, though, was the very charter that we were given by Walt Disney, that it would never be finished as long as there was imagination left in the world. And so we worked very hard to keep adding things to it, keep renewing it, keep trying to keep it fresh, but always with an eye to the original intent. I think that's the most important thing, because the original park, the lands, the stories are just also perfect. And so what we try, and Jeanette is a huge part of this with me now, is to keep the stories fresh and to keep adding to it. Our Disneyland fans, I think, are the most passionate fans out there, and I love that about them. And I always tell our Imagineers that work down there, this is their park. We just take care of it for them, you know, really. We're the caretakers. And so we listen very carefully to what the guests are saying. And that's why, that is, by the way, another reason why we are down there in the park, because we are out there every day. Our office is right there. So we are able to listen to the guest and how they're feeling about things, and see what kind of food they're liking to eat and what kind of merchandising they're buying, and constantly keeping a finger on the pulse of how you're feeling about Disneyland. So it's very important to us. And you know, the feedback we get is so important as well. And I'm constantly trying to make sure that, you know, I'm listening to what the guests are saying. And when we were doing the castle this last time, it was very scary for me to do such a huge change to the castle, but it was something that we really wanted to try. And whenever I change a color scheme, I do a color board. And it's for the painters mostly, but it's an elevation of the castle. But since it's what they use as a guide to paint, I don't put in all the details. So the color board didn't have like the drawbridge on it, or the you know, the light poles and the moat. It was just the castle. And so when we put the construction fence out in front, I thought, I'm going to make a print of my color board, and we're going to tell a little story about what we're doing here, the story of the original castle and Herbie Ryman, and then we'll put the color board out there so people can see what it is that we're doing behind that construction wall. And so the day that it went up, I waited for the park to open, and I stood out there in front wanting to listen what their comments were about the color board. And the first lady walked up and she said, see, they're taking the drawbridge out so we can't go into Fantasyland that way anymore. And I went, oh my God. I had the thing removed immediately, went back to the office and painted in the drawbridge and all the light poles and everything. And then we put it. But we do listen constantly, and I really appreciate the feedback that we get.
That's awesome. Well, we all know we wouldn't be here. We all wouldn't be here without the guests. And I wanted to know just how the guests have impacted your jobs or any of the projects that you've actually worked on. You want to start, Charita?
Sure. Well, the guests are our reason why. They are absolutely everything. And I know, you know, like I said, working with Kevin, we've had conversations about when we are crafting an experience, we always have to keep the guests in the forefront of our thinking, so that we can ensure that it will be an experience that they will really enjoy. But I have to say, as an Imagineer, one of my favorite parts of the process is after we have done an attraction, whether it's a soft opening or whether it's just opening it up for the first time to the guests at large, love to just hang out at the exit and get that first initial raw response and reaction to what we do. And I have to tell you, there's no better feeling than to hear how, you know, something that I have put and our team has put their life's blood into to bring to our guests, to have them, you know, experience it and really enjoy it. And I remember one story that was just really kind of dear to me because, you know, I've worked a lot in the innovation space and scenic illusions and that type of thing. And I remember standing at the door of an attraction that had opened up, and there was a dynamic of a father and about a 14-year-old daughter. And they were talking about something they had seen in the attraction, and the daughter was asking the dad, how in the world did they do that? So the dad was giving his best explanation of what he thought and how we had done that. And his 14-year-old daughter was shooting holes in everything that he said, right? And so finally he just gave up and he said, honey, it's just magic. And as an Imagineer and an illusionist, that really, really let me know that we had done our job.
That's awesome. Kim, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm sorry?
What are your thoughts? Guests,
Yes.
how the guests have impacted your work?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
How the guests have impacted the projects you've worked on? How the guests have impacted your work?
Influence of the guests.
Well, the guest reaction to our work?
Yeah, just
Disneyland?
how they have changed some iteration of something you've done, perhaps.
I'm sorry, I still can't hear you, Leslie. I'm just getting
We have a hard time hearing each other up here. It's like a big echo chamber.
And she's just, how have the guests affected your work or impacted your work? Yeah.
Oh, well, the guests affect my work every day, again, by just getting feedback and listening and making sure that we are, accomplishing what you're looking for. And I think that, with a Disneyland park that was built for such a small crowd, really, and the way that our crowds have grown, we're doing a lot of, expansion and growing in ways that we're trying to make invisible to the guest. And I love to hear them say, I know I have more room to walk here, but I don't know why, because all the trees are still here, all the planters are here, everything feels and looks the same. And to me, that's extremely satisfying to know that we can accomplish growth without changing the feeling of the park.
And Jeanette, do you have any thoughts on that?
I thought long and hard about this question, and it made me think about how I stupidly used to say that my favorite time at the parks, especially Disneyland, was when it was closed at night. And I say stupidly because when we closed down for the pandemic, I took that back, right? We were closed for 15 months. And Kim knows, Bob knows, we used to walk through the parks and it was empty, right? In the middle of the day, I was looking through my pictures. I had pictures of caterpillars falling out of the trees, and I saw ducks, and there was cats, and there was a crab, all kinds of animals that came out. And I don't like Disneyland closed, and I don't like it empty. And you can see a couple pictures there. Okay, how many of you were there? Because I know some of you were on the day we reopened. Anyone there? Okay, you all know exactly what it meant as a guest when you were back in our parks that day. It wasn't just a theme park. It wasn't just a Disneyland day. It wasn't just about being there. It meant more. It was your memories. It was about having a place to be again, to believe in again, to dream, to feel, to experience, right? That's why we do it. So I will tell you, there was not a dry eye in the house. Barbara was with me that morning. I am crying in this picture because that is the very first Disneyland attraction that operated that morning, which was a Main Street vehicle. And cast members lined Main Street and applauded as our guests walked down Main Street. And I will tell you, I never, ever want to see Disneyland closed again, because that's why we do it. It's nothing. It is a skeleton without the heartbeat, and that heartbeat is all of you.
Well, on that note, I know we're out of time, unfortunately, but I just want to say thank you, everybody on this panel. You are all dear friends of mine, and I have appreciated the experience to get to know you and to document your amazing work. And on behalf of everybody in this room, and everybody watching, thank you so much for 70 years and all the work you've done creating magic.